We're live.
We're live.
Hey, I'm getting better at this with paid content.
He's got control of the board.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
We're in trouble.
Well, welcome. Tonight we came up with a really good idea. I think all three of us are really excited for. We're so excited that halfway through the week, through lots of private messages, we were like, oh, shit, this is a lot of stuff. So I kind of just thought, well, we'll just talk about it, at least for me. Mm-hmm. Get some good ideas and talk about eyewitness statements. And eyewitness, I guess, I hate to say for lack of a better word, testimony, because I guess what I would shoot for would be taking eyewitness statements from people that would either tend to report seeing a ghost, a cryptoid, demons, paranormal experience. And so we thought about talking about some of the pitfalls of talking about that or taking those statements and what can go wrong when you talk to people and when they convey or when they bring up and try to recall their memories and tell them to you. Mm-hmm. And probably some of the advantages too. But so we're going to give it a shot. I think it's going to go well. It's something I think all three of us really enjoy. And I think it's something that's probably at least I haven't really heard a lot of conversation about it in paranormal groups or hobbies or conversations. And that's just basically understanding the concept of witnessing something or at least experiencing something paranormal. So I got Kenny. Oh, I got it right. I'm getting good at this.
There you go.
Dave.
I saw how slow you went, though.
Mm-hmm. So we're ready. Looks like we got JD, Bob. Hey, guys. Kathy, Donna.
Oh,
Too Lucid Dream. All right. Welcome.
Oh, nice. Welcome to the show.
Very cool.
Yeah. So what do you guys, you got any intro or anything you guys want to talk about it before we jump in? I'm telling you, I have my notebook and a fresh pen because I know Dave has at least 20 more articles that he's going to mention that I'm going to have to look up and read.
Dude, I gave up. There's so much.
Well,
I started to stop. Or I stopped when I got to the article where it said not even the psychologists or the experts in eyewitness territory had the same consensus. Like, okay. Mm-hmm. There's so much information, and actually there's been a lot of new information even in the last couple of years as far as understanding memory more, eyewitnesses, what can go wrong, how you can influence, how somebody identifies somebody, leading questions. And then you start talking about even what they experienced at the time. What was the lighting conditions? What was the context? Was it something? Did they have a weapon? Did they not have a weapon? And false identification and the biology of memory and the different stages, encoding, storage, retrieval. And there is so much stuff out there. There's lab studies and then the stuff people have done in classrooms and labs, but then you look at the stuff people did field work where there was real crimes and they went back and interviewed the eyewitnesses. Then they went back 5 months, 10 months, 24 months, whatever, interviewed them again. And sometimes that data doesn't match up with what they did in the lab. So there is a lot of information out there. And obviously this is not going to be an easy topic, or for me anyway. There's going to be no consensus because I don't even think in law enforcement and courts and psychologists have a consensus at this point. So we'll see where we go with this one.
No, and I completely agree. Like once you start down that rabbit hole, you start with this great big topic of eyewitness testimony, or at least eyewitness accounts. Well, that just branches right off the bat, like you said, biology, lighting, experiences, encoding, recall, past experiences. What is your past experiences to, in situations and some familiar situations? It just branched really fast. So yeah, I think I'm like you. I kind of think we'll probably be able to scratch the surface and bring up some really good questions that's going to confound, I hope, a lot of people and leave a lot of questions unanswered, and maybe spark the fire for people to look into it for themselves too.
Yeah, I found the same thing as you guys. I mean, once I had a little difficulty finding the time to research some of this stuff, but I was relying on you guys. I mean, the messages that we have before the show and all during the week, when you were showing links and papers, and I was trying to read some of them, and I was going through like, holy shit, there's pages and pages. And then I would do searches on myself and just realize that there's so much information. And it actually, this kind of exploits one of the good things about what we do, is that all three of us will probably follow a slightly different path with how we go about it. So you're going to get three different angles. And like you guys mentioned, a lot of stuff like recalling memory and the situation, the environmental situation, where it's like, okay, lighting and how many people are there, the noise level, all this stuff takes into account. And then I started thinking about more on the recall side, where it's not like a traumatic event that happens right away, but what happens if someone like brings up a picture or a video that they watch a day or two later or a week or two later, and then they start trying to remember the events that, if let me backtrack. When they have a photo or video that they've suddenly realized they have a ghost, in quotes, and they're like, oh yeah, I remember that time, and this was happening and this was happening. When in actuality at the time they weren't paying attention to shit. It was just a random photo, and then all of a sudden you get a whole bunch of details about exactly what was going on. So right. I mean, that's the kind of thing I started thinking about, and then getting on other things, but I'm sure we'll touch on, because I some of the papers mentioned the Innocence Project, which I found really, really fascinating. I had heard of them before, and I knew a little bit about them. So reading over the stats that they had, or the numbers that they had, was just fascinating. So there you go. That's my opening statement.
Yep. I think we're all on board then. This will be for an hour show. This is there's not a whole lot there. So I mean, not a whole lot we can actually cover. There's tons of it there, but I kind of think I'll start out with just saying I think it's notable to know that eyewitness testimony can be credible. I think that it is possible to have valid eyewitness accounts. It's not impossible, of course, but it's also of note and of great concern, especially, and again, like, I know that we're using eyewitness testimony as in a court of law, but I also I think this can relate to when you're listening to people tell an account or telling you an account of their paranormal encounter. So I think it still can apply. I don't see why it wouldn't be able to apply the same thought process, but I think, one, it can be credible. I don't think because there are pitfalls that it makes all eyewitness testimony not credible.
Right.
I do think there are pitfalls that you should not overlook. And you talking about the Innocence Project, I ended up probably on the same place that you did while I was going through this in the rabbit hole, and that was at the Innocence Project. A lot of times where they've had more than one eyewitness point out the alleged offender, only 2 years later have that person cleared by DNA. So you have multiple eyewitnesses, which I would have loved to go into the actual case and see, who interviewed those eyewitnesses, how were those statements taken, where were those statements taken, how many times were they taken, was there ever a change in the eyewitness testimony that somebody maybe came back and said, you know what, maybe I was thinking about it and I could have been wrong. What was the influence of the person that was taking the statement then? Are you sure? Like how did that happen? So there's a lot there. So I'd kind of start to say off. I'd start to say off with mine. I'm already started drinking, so that was really. I have. I'm going to get shit backwards. I know I'm going to do it. Oh my god, I'm such a lightweight. I hadn't drank for years till I started this, and now it's kind of fun.
Peer pressure.
Oh yeah. So yeah, I guess I would start out like, for me, like in my regular job, it's kind of what I do is interview people that have been witnesses to alleged crimes. So I'm pretty familiar with that. So I know that for our training, we have to keep in mind that yes, that you're the person that's going to tell you the story that they need to tell you can be credible, but the fault almost always lies when you're gathering information. It is never the fault of the witness. When something goes wrong, it is the fault of the interviewer, unless the witness is purposefully misguiding you or lying. So any question that you ask, anything that goes wrong, at least to me, in my opinion, maybe not everything, but the vast majority of making a statement incredible is going to lie on the person asking the questions. And so a lot of that has to do with how vague your questions are. I think Dave hit on it, like how leading your questions are. If they are leading, sometimes you can be leading and not even know it. There's body language that the interviewer will do, nodding your head when you agree, if you're really liking the information that you're getting. So you're nodding your head. If you don't like the information, you start shaking your head. How you lean in to the witness when you're excited or you think that there's something that you want to hear. How you lean back when you don't like what they're saying, how you cross your arms, cross your legs, everything that body language that you can do to give to that can lead to an influence. So it doesn't actually have to be verbal. It doesn't even have to be a verbal mistake that you give. It can be body language that's very simple. I think a lot of it has to do with not relying on the count. And this is very interesting to me. So I kind of went down this branch of the rabbit hole, was trauma. And I know Dave and we kind of got into this good conversation. I think it led to NDEs and crisis apparitions, which I thought I hadn't even thought about going off into that. But trauma. So I'm thinking my mind was kind of going to, well, if you're listening to somebody and they're telling you about seeing a ghost, my first thought is I would imagine they were excited. They were probably stressed. A lot of things happen in the body when you're excited and stressed. And you got to take into account that things get jumbled in a very stressful situation. So I don't know, you're in your home by yourself. You hear something in the basement. You go down in the basement. You see something run across the floor. You think it's a ghost. You don't know it's a ghost. You scream. You run upstairs. There's a lot that happens in your body at that moment. And I know that doesn't sound like trauma, and sometimes we'll talk about trauma like that, but it's kind of analogous just to being in a stressful situation. So take into account like the stress that they were under, and the encoding during that time is also important. So under stressful situations like that, a lot of peripheral information gets lost. Mm-hmm. A lot of the information is centered around survival information that you might need. So asking questions like, what color was it? How many times did you see it? Did it make any, was it wearing anything? How tall, how big, how much do you think it weighed? Those can be pretty devastating questions about stuff like that. So trauma.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. When you're not used to it, like these questions, and we've heard them before, like, oh, what they look like, how big were they, how much did they weigh, how tall? These are things that we are not used to estimating. So to do it when you're under duress, when you're in a situation where it's like whether we're talking about a real world trauma where someone's being attacked or there's a break-in or a mugging or something like that, these are details that are happening quickly and you're not going to pick them up. Most of us are not used to doing this kind of thing under stress. And I think this applies to paranormal experiences where people think that they have experienced something. And it really depends on the situation. If you see something that just pops up in front of you, that's a scary situation, and it's usually over like that within a second or two. and it's very hard to get so much information, detail that we're not used to paying attention to.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where I'm getting at. You're not used to looking at everybody and judging how much they weigh, how tall they are, what kind of clothing they wear, from head to toe. This is not something that we do normally. So to expect someone to do this in a stressful situation is even worse.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see it happening accurately. I mean, maybe it could. And you're right. I think you said it, Tim, like not all testimony is inaccurate. You might see a blue shirt, it's someone wearing a big blue shirt when it's really big. It might really be blue, but then again, it might not.
Mm-hmm.
I think but it might depend on the type of 6 types. I think there's 6 types of eyewitness testimony I came across. It's hearsay, character. I got to use my cheat notes. Circumstantial, descriptive, identifying, and essential schemata. Which, what you're talking about, Kenny, you'd have to be descriptive and identifying. Mm-hmm. But when you get into like an essential schemata, like let's say you saw a car hit another car and burst into flames, you're going to remember pretty clearly that there was an accident and a car hit another car and there was fire. You may not remember what the person in the driver's seat of the one car was wearing. You might not know if they had glasses on. You don't know necessarily if they slowed down. You might not even remember what color the car is, but even with time, you're going to remember something happened. There's this basic essential schemata that happened that your brain coded and you just have a hard time with some of the real detailed descriptions of what happened. So I think it kind of depends on what level you're going to want to hold the eyewitness testimony up to. What are we expecting people to do? And the other thing I came across, which was interesting, Tim talked about stress. Actually, there's an optimal, when you have a little bit of stress, it seems to help the efficiency of your memory. But then if it's too little or too much, that's where memory is hurt. So it's like there's this fine line. It's almost like like our alcohol levels. You hit a fine line and you perform better. And with stress, it seems like a little bit of stress helps your memory. But anything below or way above, you have a lot of problems there.
So Tim's actually a good example right now, because right now he's in.
What did I just say, Tim?
What?
Tim will pay attention now, and he'll get his facts straight. But give us like 15 minutes, and
it's coming. I was just sitting here thinking that my head's kind of swimming a little bit already.
And Tim mentioned, crisis apparitions, near-death experiences. Near-death experiences, to me, that's a whole show in itself, because one of the things is if your brain is supposedly not functioning right, which is one of the explanations, is, you're having this experience because your brain isn't functioning right. Well, see, that to me, I always have a problem with that. It's like, okay, so if you don't have oxygen, you don't have blood flow, how are you having these vivid experiences and remembering them? And they actually don't fade over years. They've gone back and re-interviewed people, and they give the exact same descriptions with the same amount of detail. So if your brain's not functioning right, how's that happening? But then that can be a stressful crisis situation, because you're dying, or you think you're dying. So that's going to be extremely stressful. And then, of course, crisis apparitions, a lot of those happen totally unexpectedly, and you might be sitting at your home and just relaxing, reading a book, and boom, it happens. So the stress level there probably isn't as high as it would be if you went to a dark prison that's abandoned, that everybody said is haunted, and you spent the last 2 hours having people tell you stories to scare the crap out of you. So I think there's a lot of little nuances with different type of experiences. Obviously, when we watch the ghost hunting shows, people are running around, and certain para-celebrities are choking themselves because they're possessed. They're stressed. They may be stressed, and the people who go and try to repeat that stuff is going to be stressful for them. But then you have this whole misinterpretation and all this other crap because they run around with the lights off. So I think it's hard to level set. You almost have to level set. It's like, what are we talking about? What we see on TV? Are we talking about maybe a real world experience that just spontaneously happens to somebody in their home? So I think there's a lot of little nuances there.
I think I would argue that the people on the television show, especially the ones that choke themselves, are not under stress. But I totally agree with you that the people that follow up, that maybe watch those TV shows of people acting really badly, believe that they're serious. So yes, the follow-up people would show up at these locations and be under stress because they would feel that because they're anticipating, the anxiety would be high and they're anticipating something happening. Especially, one of them may be choking themselves, which is just so wrong. So yeah, I would definitely see that being a high stress situation because they're going in believing that something bad could really happen.
They're under stress to get ratings.
Bob gets me all the time, man. Sometimes he hits me like I don't agree with you, and I'm thinking, oh, here we go. We're gonna have a disagreement, and then he hits me with that shit.
I think what Dave brought up was exactly like another situation that I came up with was like you have to understand like what situation are you in to gauge what type of stress you're having. There's the pop-up, like the jump scare stress. And then you have the stress that's still like you go to the places where you pay to play, which is fun. You go to an abandoned hospital or jail, and they spend the first 30 minutes walking you through, giving you horror stories that builds up your adrenaline, builds up your stress. Then they turn you loose, and then I guess in the crisis. Here we go, crisis apparitions. Like in our discussion. One of the questions that I had was, so if you're at home, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'll try to do a crisis apparition for a nutshell. So I'm not near as read about that as you are, but my understanding is that you're at home, you have a loved one that's somewhere far away or maybe just away. You don't expect them to return at a time, or you don't expect a phone call from them, yet you're at home, they walk in the door, or they walk in the room that you are in and they talk to you and you have a conversation only to learn later that they had passed away earlier. Is that correct?
Yeah. In a nutshell, that's good. Okay.
So that I would agree. Like, I think that would take away the stress of, that would be, that would be some type of like a high stress situation, because I guess the only question you would have would be like, why are you here? why are you home early, or why did you call?
Maybe surprise, not necessarily stress.
Exactly. And it doesn't even have to be a bad stress. Or a bad surprise. It could be a happy surprise that someone returned home.
Which is interesting because one of the latest studies, they just came out, I don't know, a couple months ago. They looked at after-death communications. Crisis apparitions would be part of that, or bereavement apparitions, all these different ones that are classified as after-death communication, not just necessarily going to a haunted place and trying to see a ghost or a shadow figure. And they found that 85% of the people did not find their experiences disturbing in the least. And 15% did. To me, now that as we're on this topic, I'm rereading that going, oh, that would be cool to look at how accurate maybe what they reported was in those that didn't say it was stressful versus those that did, and see if there's a difference. So there's a whole nother data set there to look at. But yeah, besides going to a place that is haunted and trying to scare yourself and have an experience, a lot of these type of experiences really aren't all that scary and stressful for people.
Yeah, for crisis apparitions, I guess.
Yeah, or just, I don't know. I mean, there's the term of crisis and after-death communication, post-mortem, all these other classifications. All they have to do is they deal with the time that something happened. But those don't necessarily seem to be all that stressful for people.
Well, I can see why it wouldn't be stressful.
But then again, you get back into the questions of, okay, so you say, and I know Kenny would do this, which is the best way to interview somebody. You would eventually say, okay, so you described that you were relaxing, reading a book, maybe sipping on a hot chocolate. The lights were kind of dim, and you thought you had this experience. To me, there's environmental and context there that you have to explore because the lights are dim, you're relaxed, maybe you're having an alcoholic beverage or two, and then you start thinking, okay, so what did you really experience?
Right.
And then you start, okay, so from that experience, then your things that you didn't perceptually see, or you couldn't even, or maybe you don't even understand, you start filling in with your biases and your view of the world. So now you're building your memory based on what you have experienced before and what you believe. And then that's one problem. Then as time goes, the recall, I think everybody will agree, especially as you get older, you don't remember shit like you used to. And something that happened to me, a year ago, I remember more clearly than 5 or 10 years ago. So not only do you have the situation and how you filled it in and how you formed the memory and filled in information, but then how do you recall it? And then how well did you encode it, or did you remember it by either rehearsing or trying to make sense of it and making sense of it in your worldview? So there is as we said before, there's just a shit ton of stuff to think about on this: biology, psychology, perception, environment, context. It's a complicated issue.
It is very complicated.
Eyewitness testimony is obviously going to be flawed in one way or another.
Right.
Right. So, and that's a good point to bring to so one of the things I think I was wanting to talk about was, when if we're doing or taking a statement, I think one of the things that help are to get a corroborative details. So taking a statement's one thing, but also listening and asking for corroboration. So something that you can actually go back, if you can go back to the place that it happened and look for the details or look for contextual clues that they had said in their statement that you can actually go back and see for yourself. One thing that does help is it helps gauge the accuracy of the statement that was given to you by going back and seeing that, pretty much everything that they're telling me that they saw is here. So if it's if it's in the jail and they've never gone down in the basement before, they've never been in this place before, they've got a flashlight, it's at night, it's 1 o'clock. They have 2 hours of horrible stories about people getting killed in the basement, and they have a flash experience, or they have some type of paranormal encounter with a ghost that charges them. I don't know. But they're telling you the story. They didn't go back in the basement. That was the only time they were in the basement. So when you ask them about what it was like, what did you see? What else was there? What else was in the room? Did you see was there any graffiti that was still around? Was there any trash in the floor? Were there any things in the floor? So things like that you can actually ask for contextual clues or corroboration. One, you can actually get corroboration to see if they were in the basement at all. But that's a different story. Two, you can actually go back and at least gauge what their memory is to see. Like if they give you 10 things that you think you can go back and pick and you find 8 out of the 10, then that gives you an idea of how accurate that they're at least recounting what they saw.
And one thing you have to be careful about is how many people have they talked to since they talked to you.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's
created this
That's
story.
not a lie. That's true. I mean, that's very true.
You get into that groupthink mentality where you have your part or your version of the story, and then any gaps that you have, if other people start filling it in, that becomes part of your story.
Yep. And I noticed that, and one of the things they brought up in the courts and the criminal system was an eyewitness will give a statement or identify somebody, and then they go on their way, and then the news coverage starts.
Yeah.
And it just kind of reinforces and builds. They're like, yeah, and that, and that, and that. Now I remember that. And then when they get them back into court, they start asking them, how sure are you? Oh, I'm positive because all these other people said that, or this other eyewitness said that, and I heard about this and I heard about that. So they almost get tainted and contaminated from the time of the original experience until they would testify, which I'm assuming the similar type of thing would happen in a ghost hunt with a couple different people. I mean, we've all seen it. Somebody's in a dark room in the basement. They're like, "Oh my God, I just saw something." They talk to everybody in the group, and everybody's like, "Oh yeah, and I heard this story about that in the basement, and I thought I saw something similar to that." So their confidence is building, and they start really believing. That's exactly
good catch.
what happened.
Yeah, good catch, bro. That's awesome. Like you had an experience. That is amazing. Well, I mean, there even becomes a point.
Down there too, man.
There even becomes a point where I could say, in a situation like that, that you after something like that, okay, this is like weird, but you have a little bit to lose. So if you say you had a paranormal experience and you actually came face to face with a ghost, and let's just say like you actually believe it, I'm like, you're not making it up. Something happened. Your brain figured it out in your head that you just had an experience with a ghost. So you tell everybody. And just like Dave said, you get positive feedback, positive. Well, all of a sudden,
Les Kenny's there.
Oh, sorry. All of a sudden.
Then he counters that. I don't believe that shit.
I bring balance to the force, bitch.
But see, that's good though. I mean, there's the first spin on the computer screen.
Oh, I am gonna go back and screen cap that shit.
That's gonna be our new promo video, right? Tim
clean off my screen.
Droplets and orbs all over his screen.
That was good. Okay, so
no, it's true though. I mean, whoever's there, it biases it.
At some point, you become you will get positive reinforcement because people will be like, "Oh, dude, you actually saw a ghost." So you get to tell the story over and over and over again. You get rewarded by the positive reinforcement. So at some point, I'm just saying it's possible that you no longer want to critically examine your own experience, because then you would have to go back and say, "I was wrong." Does that make sense?
I don't think the critical review of your own experience is something that comes natural to anyone.
But isn't part of actually encoding and storing, if you go from the perception to short-term memory to long-term memories, to actually think about it and to examine it and critically examine it and try to fit it into what's meaningful to you? I mean, that's one of the main. Tim probably knows better, and I'm sure Bob does. But part of that is actually thinking about it and putting it into meaningful terms and reasoning through it to get it from your short-term to your long-term memory.
So I'm still finding alcohol-laced coffee on my keyboard.
I do think confidence has a lot to do with it too. The more confident you are, the more well, I guess the more confident you are, the more confident you are in your statement. And I think we see that a lot. I think we see that when we do interact with certain ghost hunters or, paranormal enthusiasts, or what do they call paranormalists? That are so confident in their stories and or beliefs because they've repeated the stories over and over again. They've gotten that positive reinforcement from others, and whether they share the same story or not. It could be a different version that they reconcile, they justify to be, the same kind of story coming out of it. So it's like, oh, I had this happen and I had this to happen. Oh, it's not exactly the same, but it's probably the same ghost. So, oh, that's awesome. Cool story. So the confidence builds.
It wasn't in one of those papers that we shared back and forth. That was one of the things that was not correlated to accuracy was confidence. And they seemed, maybe I may have read that a little later on in my research and I lost the exact point, but I thought they said something almost like, if they are just so confident, that's actually a red flag.
Yes. Confidence.
Yeah. Something about confidence. If it's too high and they're too sure, you should look at that and go, really?
I remember that was the one article I think we shared. I think that's the last one that you shared on this topic. which I went through, which was really good, was I remember reading in there about the confidence and the warnings about confidence. And yeah, when you said the no correlation about confidence and accuracy was, I remember reading that too in that one.
Yeah, I'm trying to get back to that. I mean, it was confidence. They were talking about jurors, the jury, and how confident a jury would be in their I don't think the jury. When a witness would be very confident, as in when the witness is asked, is the person that attacked you in this courtroom, and they're like, yes, that person right there. And when they were asked, are you sure? Yes, I'm absolutely sure. That amount of confidence had an influence on the jury because they didn't question it. It was more, okay, they are so confident. They're not even hesitating. They're not saying, I don't know, maybe. It's like the confidence level was pretty much taken at face value. And it was just based on the statement, no evidence, but just the statement. So I'm trying to find the actual paper.
I think it was was it the one in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, Why Eyewitnesses Fail? That's based on another 500-page report that they put out. And he just summarized the psychological, the scientific aspects of it.
You're sending me this shit when I'm in fucking training. And I'm like, sorry, I can't do schoolwork. I need to read this. This has to do with my podcast.
Yeah, Bob.
Priorities, Kenny.
We can share it if we don't pop it up here before the show's over. I'll just post it afterwards.
Well, I can't. I can't share it in the link, but I can share it to you guys, and then Tim can.
Tim would have to do it.
Tim can share it. So I'll put it right here and paste, and there it goes. So Tim can fix that. But yeah, I mean, it's. I'm trying to find the confidence. Let me see. Do this way, because I do find confidence is a big deal. Now, when we translate it over to paranormal experiences, and I mean, it's funny. Like, and this is totally a stereotype, so I apologize in advance. But I see. Mostly these guys that run a paranormal team, and they're the ones that wear the vest with the bulging pockets, with all kind of batteries and flash drives and shit, that they are very, very confident in what they are saying. And as long as you don't question them, they are confident as fuck. Like they are right on point. They know their shit. And I think that comes off as very believable. If you walk up and you have no idea what's going on, they do appear to be an authority figure. You listen to them and they talk with confidence. And I think confidence just really has a big deal until some jackass comes along and says, "What do you mean by that? What does this mean? What does that mean?" And you see the confidence level drop, and then it becomes a problem. You see, you kind of part the veil there. And you see what's really going on.
Right.
All right. You share. Oh, good. You shared it. Good.
Yeah, I got it.
All right. What else you got, Tim?
Well, what else? Well, I kind of thought maybe we could think about things that we could do better if we're listening to someone give a statement. If they want to give us a statement, or we're trying to take a statement, or we're trying to take an account of what they've experienced, like what are some things we can do or people that listen can do when it happens to them that could help the reporter or the person given the information to better accurately give the information, and maybe even like things that we can do to avoid pitfalls. I don't know. What do you think?
Sure.
Okay. 'Cause I think going down, I mean, we could do probably a month of shows on this, which I'm not against. Like, I really like it.
Yeah.
I guess probably for me would be, I would have to, my first thought would be to let them, when you're listening to someone give a statement or say what they've experienced, is to let them roll with it. and let them go, and try not to interrupt. The only time I would think would be a time to interject anything is if they ask you, you know, do you understand, or are you getting my picture? Other than that, I would let them go through it, and then any questions that you have. One of the things that I like to do is I like to start back with saying, this is what I heard you say. I'm going to tell you what I heard you say. And you correct me at any point if you hear me get anything wrong.
Damn it, Tim, stop fucking reading what I'm writing.
I think that one, that gives them permission to interrupt you and correct you, which sometimes some people don't want to do, but it's important for them to do. And I think sometimes as people, we think if I get something wrong, they're going to tell me I got something wrong. That's not always the case. So I would read back, I would listen, I would say back everything that I heard. Typically during that time, if I had a question at some point, like if they said I went to this place that had a basement, I went into the basement and I experienced a ghost. So if I would be like, okay, I'm going to tell you back everything, you know, what I heard you say. Well, I heard you say that you went to this place and you went and it had a basement. I would first begin by saying, tell me about the place. Like, what did the place look like? One of the things that helps prompt memory is having memory practice. Yes. So you can start asking questions about not the scary event, but you can start asking questions about things that lead up to it, because you'll begin giving a practice of recall, so they can begin juicing up their brain and getting on a roll. So little things like, how did you get there? Did you drive, walk? Did a friend take you? You know, that will start the process. So when you get there, you know, what did it look like? You went to this place. Was it a 2-story? Was it a house? That begins sharpening their skill at recall before you even get there. So I guess I'll leave it at that and let you guys go, but I got some other things. But so basically, yeah, I just let them go. And then I tell back the story and give them permission to correct me if I get anything wrong. And then that way it begins an equal discussion instead of interviewer, interviewee, person of authority versus person that is there to do something for the interviewee. It turns into an equal balance of power.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I would add, you know, try to get their testimony as quickly as possible after the experience. If you're on site with them, keep them away from other people. And, you know, it might not hurt to have them do a free form fill out, just write what your experience was without any interaction with you at all. Because then you have a written record and you're not influencing anything. So then you could look at it, you could read it, and then potentially ask them questions after that. But, you know, it's just trying to avoid, for me, you know, leading questions or trying to look like you're being judgmental or trying to lead them down a certain path or getting them to create a story to fill in the blanks. Yeah, a lot of the stuff that they recommend in the couple articles I read that they try to encourage law enforcement to do when they're taking eyewitness testimony are the similar things that investigators should do when you're talking to somebody about their experience or when they're trying to relay it to you. So I would say, yeah, definitely separate them, have them get it down on paper as soon as possible, and then, you know, explore the questions that you might have to clarify anything you need to. But as far as, you know, I see Brandon asked a quick question here. Do we discount?
Oh, I was going to bring that up. I was going to,
yeah.
Because all people are flawed. I mean, my point of view, and Kenny and I have gone back and forth on this many times. I don't think we obviously, I don't think we should discount all subjective experiences. We know people are flawed, but my argument back has always been that there's been so many reports and so many experiences and case collections, and they've analyzed these case collections and they've come up with certain potential attributes and things that you should look for, and you can understand the phenomenology of what's going on, that they they're important because people do have the experiences. Every human has experiences. It's going to be flawed on a certain level. We know that. But if you study a variety of different people with a variety of different experiences and look for commonalities, that helps build a picture of what might actually be going on with a certain phenomena, which to me, you can start leading to maybe testing certain things and looking for certain characteristics of the phenomena or environmental changes. So I don't think we should discount subjective experiences, because I do like the second part of that is, yeah, if you're going to say people are flawed, then we can't, bad data is bad data, right? So
Right.
you can't say you had a paranormal experience and you can't say, well, hell no, you didn't experience that. We know it was something else if it's flawed. So I think we need to take their experiences, understand there's limitations, and there's reasons why people do case collections and analyze multiple witness reports of certain types of phenomena to try to draw out what might really be going on. If Dave just says he saw a ghost and it was floating off the floor and it was slightly illuminated, who gives a shit what Dave thinks? But when another 500 people have similar experiences and you pull out a couple things that everybody reported that are similar, that becomes a little more meaningful.
And I want to jump in and just and address this too. Like, I agree with what you're saying, Dave. I do, and I think my standpoint has always been, I don't take either side. Like, I don't separate believer subjective experiences and skeptical subjective experiences. They're all subjective to me, and what I try to I guess clarify is that these are subjective experiences. People are flawed. Doesn't mean you discount the experience or the description of the experience or the perception of the experience. You don't discount it outright.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a starting point, because yes, people do make mistakes, but not all the time. So you have to take that experience when you get the interview. And you go through the interview, you don't lead them, you let them talk. At most, when they mention something that is not clear, or not clear. Now
you're next.
No, it's not clear. Then, like for me, I take notes. I will sit there and have a notebook, and I will write certain things down, like we do during the show. Write down certain things so I can come back to it and say, okay, you mentioned this. And I will repeat the quote back to them. Can you clarify that? Can you give me more information on that? I'm not going to say, do you think that was a ghost? Or do you think that was, something happening? I'm not going to say something like that, because that's leading. I want to know what your story is. And then once I get the full story, then to me, it's time to start checking it. So if there's things that we can check, details of the house, equipment being used, this and that, check it. Because, yeah, sometimes you're going to find that it's exactly what they said. Okay, yeah, the third step on that stairway caved in. It's loose. So if you step on it, it'll break.
Yeah,
that might be true. But you might come back and go up on the stairs and just say, okay, well, it's just slightly unlevel. It actually doesn't give away. The story might be a little bit different. Or they might misremember. You have to verify it. All of this stuff, when it's anecdotal, you really have to verify it. I have trouble taking things like that at face value, because you're putting a lot of weight on what someone says. And this is going to sound bad, but not everyone's honest. Not everyone is completely honest. And that's two different things. Some people, Zach Baggins, totally hoax shit, totally make shit up. There's other people that aren't sure, and they fill in the gaps. And then over time, that confidence builds in that story that they created. And they're not lying, but what they're saying is a story that they created over time. And then you have the third option. I'm sure there's other options, but there's the third option, main option, where, yes, someone told you what happened, and that's exactly what happened.
Right.
And if we go look into it and that is what happened, then so be it. I mean, I'm not going to just dismiss an account just because I think eyewitness testimony is flawed, because it is, but not all the time. So I think we agree mostly.
Yeah. And getting back, kind of taking what you said and circling back to what Tim had asked and was talking about, how can we do better? I think there's certain things that help the accuracy of a memory, or this even gets into flashbulb experiences and episodic experiences. The things to understand, which would tend to maybe make the accuracy better and the memory recall better, is things such as what was the importance of the event to the person? How important was it? Because those tend to be remembered better and longer if it's important to you.
Yeah.
What are the consequences involved? From what I saw, what is the consequence for me having that experience and thinking about it in a certain way? So if it goes totally against everything I believe in all my past experiences, I'm going to have a problem with that. But if it's really important and profound for me, and I think it's going to shed new light or even adds to what I already know, you're probably going to remember that better as you go forward, because you're not going to use confirmation bias to pick it apart. How distinct was it? Yeah, I mean, come on. If you ask me if I'm driving down the road, if I saw the squirrel running up the tree on the side of the road, fuck no. You're lucky I'll run it over if it runs in front of me, in front of my truck, because my wife's always looking for him and screaming. I'm just like going down the road, like whatever. But if it's very distinct and it really stands out, you're going to remember it better. Is there personal involvement? Was I there? Did I experience? Was I involved in the experience? That'll have a impact on it. The proximity, how close were you? There's one thing to say I experienced, let's say, the ghost of my dad appearing in front of me, 3 feet in front of me, as opposed to 200 yards away. Because I'd be the first one to admit I can't see that far away. I don't know who that was. I can assume it was a certain thing. And then, of course, is it emotionally arousing? Does it get you emotionally aroused? Those things tend to be more remembered with more detail, and it doesn't fade as much as things that just don't have any impact on you emotionally at all.
And that's getting into flashbulb memory. I think that's what
it covers both. It just covers general memory as well as flashbulb. But even in general memory, things that are more personal and more meaningful, more emotional, you're going to remember better anyway.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I agree with that you would remember.
Well, that's what that's
better.
I'll send you the psychology textbook. I took it out of.
Well, all right. Now I know who to argue.
I'm just gonna. That's what I found in the textbook.
Well, I think, I don't know if I was referring to your entire statement, but more for the flashbulb memory, because I remember I couldn't find it in the limited time that I had when I actually focused on it, but I remember the Challenger explosion experiment that dealt with flashbulb memory, and
there's a couple of them. There's 9/11, there's Challenger, there's Princess Diana, and
right.
And the one thing they found out, the more relevant it was to people and more emotional to them, they actually remembered it better. And I think those couple factors, at least 3 or 4 or 5 of them out of the 6 or 7 I listed, actually showed improvement on recall even in flashbulb memories.
Yeah, I got to read that again.
There's so many. See, that's the thing. There's so many nuances here. It's like, okay, Challenger may have been very traumatic for people, but on the other hand, how personal was that to you?
Well, it's not
one of the astronauts on that space shuttle. You remember a hell of a lot more of that day, as opposed to somebody sitting in a grade school going, "Oh, space shuttle blew up."
That's not that the actual events of the Challenger explosion is not what the study that I remember reading. And again, I have to find it. It was not about the actual events of the Challenger explosion. It was the everyday events that were going on, as in like, oh, I remember where I was and exactly what I was doing and everything going on at the time that exploded. And it's same with when 9/11 happened, when people report that they know exactly where they were, exactly what they were doing, and this and that. And I really don't want to comment too far because I don't remember. I remember reading the study, but not everything that dealt with it.
Yeah,
and it was
and
not
clear, those things I said don't mean it's 100%. They lead to 100% good recall. It just improves it.
right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I remember from the study, again, now I'm recalling, so who knows what my memory is.
Well, we all know that shit, according to what you're talking about.
It was
Drinking.
interviewing people like a few days or 2 weeks after the event, and then coming back several months later and having their recollection being different. And again, not of the actual event, but the environment that they were in, the details of the environment they were in at the time actually would differed from what they reported first.
And that's interesting question is it, then does it thanks. Everybody loves the lights. I'll have to make sure the neighbors leave them up year round. So when we do the show, it looks really cool. So the important point there is it important to remember the everyday mundane stuff you were doing at the time? Or is it important that you remember the event, the shuttle blowing up?
So I guess for me, if we're translating, if we're comparing this to a paranormal event, this is what I look for. Because if someone's trying to remember what was going on at the time, what they were doing, the settings, where other people were, which to me is really important, like where your other teammates are at the time you had this sighting or experience. I don't want to say sighting because that narrows it down. When you had some kind of experience, if you don't know the details of what's going on, whereas in like, where are all your teammates? What's going on in the room down the hall or upstairs? What were you doing at the time? All of these details are actually important to this event because it affects your perception. Because if somebody on your team is down the hallway making that noise or causing that shadow, you're not experiencing a ghost, you're experiencing someone on your team. So I guess that's where I'm coming from on this.
I get that. Yeah, I get that. I guess, yeah, and that's where we start trying to pick apart. Somebody had an experience. We all will agree. Let's say somebody had an experience. What that experience was is up to debate.
Right. The cause. We have to find the cause.
Right. And then you're moving up those different levels of eyewitness testimony then.
Yeah.
You can say, okay, with this essential schemata, something happened. You had an experience, fine. But then trying to identify and having descriptive of exactly where everybody was and what was happening, that's, I think we'll be honest, I'll admit that's where it gets dicey.
Right.
And that's where you have to understand certain things in order to say what it was. I think the problem is nobody's arguing people don't have experiences here. I think the problem is how much detail in both memory and what was going on at the time in the context to try to extract an explanation of what happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the point. Because if I'm in a house with 5 other people running around with K2 meters being idiots and, I have an experience in the basement, I'm going to be really doubtful of what that probably was, just because there's people running around making noise and I don't know what's going on and I'm in a foreign place. But if I'm at my house and I'm, I haven't been drinking and I'm coherent and something strange happens, I'm probably going to have a different view of that experience than I would if I'm out in a strange location with other people running around uncontrolled. To me, I'm just going to view that differently.
Yeah. And I think that's just the big difference. I mean, a lot of what I do is focused on the eyewitness testimony and what were you doing? Where were you? Where was everyone else? What were you doing at the time? Because I deal with a lot of photography, a lot of video, and this is important shit, and when someone tells me, oh, you know what? I got this great video it's of a ghost. And I ask, well, when did you discover it? Oh, like 3 months after I took it. Okay, great. That's wonderful. But now already I have the issue where I seriously doubt I'll hear them out. So I won't discount them. I'll hear them out, but I have serious doubts that they're going to recall any details of what was going on at the time they took that video.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, and again, it goes back to the beginning. Like, I love this. We have 3 different perspectives of this topic, and I love this. This is fucking awesome. I'm getting drunk. So I'm getting all mushy. I love you guys.
Love you, man.
So I guess to come back to Brandon, was it Brandon? Yeah, his question really set off a really good discussion. But I hope the way I read his comment, I hope that that's not what we're sounding like, that you dismiss everything. I think our goal is just to like at least make aware of the problems that can happen in recounting the memory of an experience that you had. Not that because there's a problem that discredits everything.
Right.
I think one, you could also use this argument of false, of poor memory to help understand, I mean, maybe they did have a paranormal experience. I mean, I don't know. It's if you can get it more accurate and at least have corroborative details that you can go to the location and corroborate a statement. I think that can actually help support what someone's saying. Doesn't mean because you can support the statement that it was a ghost, but I think what it means is like, actually, I mean, what they're telling me seems to be fairly accurate. I think that helps you as someone that's trying to Scooby-Doo this shit. You have a better platform to stand on and build your work from. So the more confident you feel in everything that they're telling you, the more confident you know the direction to go to see what really happened.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, when I do meet with people, and I had the chance to talk to somebody today about something like this, an experience, and I didn't discount it. It was, all right, give me the details. Let me start looking into it. Because I'm interested, I really am. Despite how skeptical I am, I really want to find some cool shit.
And the thing to remember, even in peer-reviewed published scientific studies, they point out the limitations of the study.
Right.
So, I mean, we're simply pointing out that there's going to be some problems and potential limitations with eyewitness testimony. However, that doesn't mean there isn't good testimony in eyewitness accounts. There are, depending on various factors and people and age and context and how relevant and all these different factors we talked about. There can be better eyewitness testimony than others. And actually that same paper, they talk about how you might be able to use some of this information they've learned over the years to determine if a certain type of eyewitness and their testimony is potentially more accurate than another one based on all these different factors that they've identified.
Right. I
mean, obviously age is an impact. The environmental factors are easy to say if it was well lit versus not lit. Did the investigator lead you in questions or didn't they? So there's all these little things they could use to say, we believe that based on all this research and this data and statistically looking at it, that this eyewitness testimony is probably pretty good. You could probably assign a confidence level to it. I think that's what they're trying to get at. Or you could say this one over here is horrible because of all these factors.
Yeah. And I also want to put out there that it's not just quote unquote believers that I will, question. Even if a quote unquote skeptic comes in and makes a statement that doesn't seem right, you better believe I'll turn my attention right to them and be like, wait, you said this. What do you clarify that? What do you mean by that? I have no problem going, questioning anyone. And it's not because I want to prove them wrong. I want to make sure that the information that anyone is saying, including myself, is accurate. and that's why, like, when I brought up this the paper that I read about the Challenger experiment, I'm not sure, so don't quote me on that. You know, I'm not sure exactly what I read because it's been a while, and I know I'm not remembering it accurately. So I want to go back and find it, and then I'll share it with you guys, and you can tell me what you think. But
there was one interesting I wanted to mention as far as we're talking about ghosts. There's this.
We're talking about ghosts.
Well, our show, we usually talk about ghosts. Bartlett in 1932 showed that memory is not just a factual recording of what has occurred, but what we make effort after meaning. And he did the famous study, and look it up. It's to me, this was fascinating. War of the Ghosts.
What is it? What was that?
War of the Ghosts by Bartlett.
Damn, that sounds like a good book.
That sounds good.
The story is a North American folk tale called War of the Ghosts. When asked to recount the detail of the story, each person seemed to recall it in their own individual way, which is okay. That's fine. The one thing I found that was interesting, at least in this analysis of it, for example, the information about ghosts was omitted as it was difficult to explain. Whilst participants frequently recalled the idea of not going because he hadn't told his parents where he was going. I mean, you have to read the story, but I found it interesting that because it was difficult to explain and maybe a concept that these people had in the study, that they left the part about ghosts out of it because they couldn't explain it and it just didn't jive with them.
Right.
So it goes both ways. I mean, you leave out stuff because it doesn't jive with maybe what you are comfortable with, but you might also include things that you're more comfortable with.
Well, yeah. That comes down to our biases that, you know, we don't want to offer information that might go against what we think.
Yeah.
So that's a difficult practice or what's the word I'm looking for? I'm going to just keep going with practice. That's a different practice, difficult practice to get over.
Yeah.
Or habit. That's what I'm looking for. Habit. It's a difficult habit to break because you want to tell a story, but you also want to be right.
Yep.
And it's very difficult to get over that hump and say, well, you know, here's what I think happened. Here's what I found, but I also found this that doesn't agree with me. So there you go. It's very difficult to bring that shit up.
Yep.
You gotta. You really gotta. This is interesting. I'm going to read this tonight when we're done. Reconstructed memory experiment. Interesting. Okay.
Well, I guess I think maybe just to recap what I think at least the three of us wanted to accomplish was to at least acknowledge the fallibilities of memory, to be aware of them, maybe to think about looking for techniques that we can do to be better listeners, and hopefully is to spark, like what you just said, to spark ideas that some people might want to just look up on their own and have I mean, I don't know if everybody has as much fun as me doing research, but I like it. And you know, like you said with that study, you know, I really like Google Scholar and looking up stuff that fascinates me. So I hope there's just so much in this. Like this is such a big topic. I hope at least it sparks some interest for people to do their own, you know, go out and just do some and you know, reading and learning. So I hope that we accomplish that.
I mean, as best we could, because you're right. There's so much. I kept seeing you guys post links, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't have time to read this, but I want to. And I find, like, you know, again, I'm in training, and I know it. I did it at least once where the instructor's like, what do you think? And I'm like, hold on. Hold on. Okay, I'm done. All right. What are you talking about? Because it's so interesting, the conversations that we have offline or online, but off the show. But there's so much material out there. Yeah, an hour show cannot do it justice whatsoever. This is, like you said, Tim, I think we're scratching little scratch of the
Little
surface.
scratch.
This moon-sized subject.
And these questions went back and forth between us, and I think I posted at least one of them is looking at this data, these reports, these studies on eyewitness testimony in real world situations and lab situations as it relates to really legal matters. So one of the things I posed early on is how relevant is this to anomalous experiences? That's a whole area that I don't know. Maybe there is literature out there, but I haven't seen a whole lot of it. How does it differ? And then there are differences even within the papers and the information I found. There's real differences between what the lab studies found and what the real world studies found, going out and actually asking people that were part of a situation. Then, of course, it's all about, is it an unimportant event to you or is it an important event to you? To me, these are all things that make a big difference. And there's probably a big data gap in the whole paranormal anomalous experience arena as far as eyewitness testimony and evaluating.
I think you hit it right there. It's the difference between the lab and real world. I mean, it's real world. Some of these experiences you're not ready for. And I think if you're in the lab, you expect something. Even if you're blinded to it, you expect something. You're going into an experiment. There's something going to happen. I've
read some of the same books you have, and the stuff by Loftus and other people. And then when you start looking at people that said, okay, yeah, but that was lab stuff. Okay, we went out and did this with people who had an actual experience, and we found that their recall and memory was much better than what they found in the lab studies. So it's like, Jesus Christ, okay. Shit. So there's nothing easy about it, but it's really a fascinating topic. And I think we did a good job at least raising a bunch of issues tonight.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it was good conversation, and I was trying to monitor the conversation in the chat room, and it looks like there was a good conversation going there too.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's so many different pathways we could take with this topic that, we can revisit this a few times, I think.
Yeah,
sure. We can weave it in.
Obviously, we're not going to discount all experiences and what people report. Otherwise, what would be the point?
Right.
Even looking into anything.
Exactly.
Yeah. There'd be no point in
Human
this.
experience is what's driving this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's fascinating. I find it fascinating. I mean, on different levels, not just, what can a witness tell me about an event, but also looking deeper into how they perceive the events, like how did they translate it to themselves, and then comparing it with some other witness that may have other biases and how they translate it, or how they perceived it. I think it's fascinating to see the differences between eyewitnesses, because I mean, if you put the three of us, and then if we get someone that we would consider like a stereotype believer, if we put all of us into a haunted house when something goes on, I guarantee you that we will have 4 different perceptions of what happened. And we would have to, but I think we would also have like very different. We would have across like a chart. We would have a line, and you'd have the one end, the other end, probably me, and you guys in the middle, somewhere in the middle, but 4 completely different perceptions of the same exact event. I don't know why, but I just found that fascinating.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting. It's a great topic, and there's just so much to it. And as Kenny said, not just the memory part and the eyewitness part, but how do you interpret that and what do you do with it? Right.
Oh man. Bob just mentioned we put a religion into it. Oh shit. That's that's another layer.
But that'll definitely shape the interpretation.
Yeah.
What you experienced.
Yeah.
And when we get back to when you're trying to commit that to long-term memory, and if you don't remember certain things or they don't jive with what you believe in your past experiences, then those type of your religious experience is going to help you fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
So, and interpret it potentially. Yep.
I gotta say we're at a minute and 14.
What quantum wormhole did we jump into, Tim? It's been a minute and 14 seconds.
We're at an hour and 14 minutes. So I think we could probably close it and go on. And I appreciate everybody listening. Two things for me, just out of one is just my memory. I was watching some of the discussion as well and the Challenger. I can remember where I was. I can remember the context of the day, of the time. So for Dave's account, I watched it because I've always loved science. I've always loved NASA. Like growing up, like I was that kid that wanted to like be an astronaut that would show up every now and then with like the plastic helmet at school in elementary school and get the crap beat out of him. Nerd. Yeah. So I was taking the day off anyway when the Challenger was taken off, but we had a snow day. If I'm remembering, if that's the right one. So I remember sitting on the couch watching the TV. If you ask me like what color the TV was or what the TV looks like, here's the thing that I find interesting. Like I think I remember like it's brown and I'm old enough that it was the type of TV that stood on four legs and it was a big box thing. And, you know, you had to like, when you were the kid, you had to be the one to get up and walk across and change the channels because you were the remote growing up. Yeah. But we had the day off because of a snowstorm the night before, and it was very bitterly cold. So the two things I remember was the day that it happened, the storm had passed and it was very bright and sunny. It was beautiful. But it was so cold that we had ice just hanging, huge batches of ice hanging off the side of our house. And I remember the explosion, but that's it. Like, I don't remember like anything else. Like, what I find interesting is like, because I knew I was in my living room, I think my memory puts together like what should be in the living room, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So I want to say like the curtains were like the floral print. That's telling my age, but I can't tell you if that's right. I want to say that the carpet was green, but we've had several carpets when I was growing up. So I couldn't say that. It's just fascinating trying to remember it, thinking that my brain is probably filling in everything else except for I just remember seeing it on the screen explode. And I remember out the window seeing sunshine and huge chunks of ice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's it. And I think everything else, my brain fills in being inside the house because that's where I grew up. So my brain just puts this living room. It makes me wonder if my brain just makes a collage of little pieces, like it gathers everything that is left in that brain of my memory and puts it together and formulates something that would be acceptable to my memory to make a living room. The second thing real fast is Stacy's birthday is next Saturday. So we could probably like have like at least a happy birthday.
We should have cake.
We could have cake.
We should have cake.
We should go get a little cupcake, put a candle on it. There you go.
All right.
I feel the same. I remember being in a classroom. I remember because I was in grade school. I was in the classroom. I remember looking up in the corner of the room because they had the big TV mounted in the corner of the room.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was an announcement because the teacher went over, turned the TV on, and we watched it. But I couldn't tell you where I was sitting. I couldn't tell you who was around me. I don't know, my classmates, I don't know who was around me. Mm-hmm. I can't even tell you who my teacher was or what class or whatever. All I remember is, yes, the TV in the corner watching the space shuttle explode and thinking, oh, crap, there was a teacher on board.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the thing that stood out to me. A teacher was on board and shit, but that's it. Like the rest of it, I don't know at all. And I mean, I can make guesses because I went to a Catholic school, so I can pretty much nail the uniforms that people were wearing. I can come up with that and give you an idea of what the desks might have looked like. But other than that, like, there's nothing else left. So I'll leave you guys with just to take better notes, maybe. Something that I do. I mean, I always have a notepad with me. I have a notebook with me. I have the old, I call them journalist notebooks, the little pocket-sized notebooks that I'm constantly taking out and flipping out and writing notes down. But I constantly write down what I see or what I hear or what people tell me. And I don't hesitate to say, can you repeat that? Tell me again in your own words, so I can write it down. And I've been known to like actually write something down and show it to them. Say, this is what you said, right? Can you clarify? Yes. Okay, good. And put a check mark next to it so I know that I checked the quote. But write down descriptions of things. Write down what you see, what you hear, so that you can go back on the notes. I'm constantly, I thought about this, Tim, what we talked about weighing our notebooks. I actually bought a brand new notebook and I'm going to weigh it. And then when I'm done with it, weigh it again just to see how much ink I put into that book.
Yeah.
Because I write so many fucking notes. I mean, like, I'm not even home and I have 3 notebooks here and I know I have 2 more in my car, plus a folder of printouts that I take with me all the time. And that's just because I keep writing it down because I know that I can't trust memory. I'm not sure. I don't want to have to say, what did I do? Or what did they say? I don't want to have to do that. So I write everything down. So that's my advice. Write everything down.
Yep. Definitely.
Dave?
No, I agree with all that. And just be aware that there are pitfalls and shortfalls with memory and having experiences. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there's ways to help capture your experience better. And Kenny mentioned that. Write things down, take notes, be aware of what's going on. And I mean, really just be honest with the fact that your memory is not going to be perfect. And what you experience isn't comparing notebook sizes. Only us 3 nerds would be comparing notebook sizes. Again, my point is there's a lot of differences between lab studies, field studies, and I think there's a gap in how all of this and the research that might need to be done in anomalous experiences, because that's a whole different area. Because you have people that are comfortable in situations that have experiences that are, at least with the current study, 85% of them are not stressful or unsettling and unexpected. And however, that part of it is similar enough to when somebody witnesses a crime out of the blue or something happens. It's unexpected. So there's definitely similarities, but there's a lot of differences too. And there's a gap there. And to try to understand and extend what we've talked about and what's published already, might be some shortfalls there too. But there's nothing wrong with identifying the limitations of what you're talking about. In our case today, eyewitness testimony, memory, because every study you read, if it's a good study, they typically list and acknowledge the limitations as well. But that's good because you know what the limitations are and you know what you can get out of what you just read or what you just experienced.
Right. Well, knowing your limitations is good because you can acknowledge them and then try to compensate for them.
Like getting a bigger notebook.
There you go.
Okay. Well, I think that's it. Let me get our music queued up, and I don't know if we had any winners yet on.
Nope. That reminds me, we should announce that again. We are still looking to give away a T-shirt. I think it's the ghost hunting chi-square
2x2. Yeah.
contingency table. Yes. You will win one of those t-shirts if you can take the theme song here and tell us what the 4 phrases are, word for word. If you can do that, you'll win a t-shirt. There is one person that I know of that is off by 2 words on one phrase. She's got all the other ones, but I think she may have given up for a while. She was getting so pissed off. That was Kat. Haven't heard from her for a while, so every time I sent a guess and I said no, I think for like a couple weeks ago, she's like, I think I got it. Is this it? I'm like, no. She's like, haven't heard from her for a while. So anyway, that is still ongoing. So try to get those words, and we do drop a lot of hints.
Yep.
We certainly do. Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate everybody for watching and listening. That was kind of a large elephant to try to eat on that kind of topic. So good deal. All right, I'll get out. We'll play it out. And thanks for listening. And
Thank you.